Clearly, remote work is working. 6 out of 10 employees have jobs that can be done remotely. They say that they prefer working from home for at least part of the time. This has been the result of a Gallup poll. So why? Why is it that they prefer this? Well, they cite improved work-life balance, better time management, lower burnout, and then also higher productivity. These are just some of the different factors that are mentioned in this poll. And for the employers, the perks are obvious. You get access to a huge pool of talent. Consider myself, for example. I live in a town of 4,000 people. Hiring virtually is a no-brainer. It gives me access to a much bigger pool so I can hire the best. Not just the best in my town, but the best that I can find access to that can do the job remotely. Given the obvious benefits, it's no great shock that in 2025, 4 in 10 companies follow a remote or a hybrid model. Building a team culture remotely is the top challenge for remote companies though, which has led to the belief that it just can't be done well. Well, that's obviously not true. With the right approach, a remote or hybrid company can absolutely build a thriving culture. In this post, we're going to bust the myth that you can't build a culture remotely by looking at proven strategies for doing it right. Learning how to build team culture remotely will help you reach new levels of success as you continue to scale. Here's one of the key things you need to do is design strong communication channels. This is very important. Establishing clear channels of communication will play a big role in building culture in your remote teams. Here are a few key areas that you need to focus on. One of them is team communication pathways. Outline how communication should flow during a project. When and how should team members check in and with each other? Set up a calendar of key milestones along with team updates about them. All these different things are going to give you touch points and a structure for the communication so everybody knows when and how and who to communicate with. Use platforms that allow for asynchronous communication while keeping everything in a central place, like Trello or Slack. These will help everyone stay dialed into a project status and the next steps. Keep it all inside of one channel for that specific project. That way there's not overlap or miscommunication. Also, it'll make it easier to go back through and get caught up on that specific project. Another thing is virtual one-on-ones. This is also pretty important. Hold one-on-ones regularly with the people you manage. Follow these practices to make the most out of each and every session. So here's a few suggestions. Focus more on feelings than facts. Instead of just asking what they did last week, also ask them what felt stressful or time-consuming and what brought a sense of pride. The reason you want to do this, I know this feels a little touchy-feely, but the reason you want to do this is because when you're working remotely, you can have a tendency to feel isolated because you're doing your work without all the idle chit-chat or communication across desks or cubicles. So another thing is be vulnerable by sharing stories about how you've struggled in some real ways in the past or maybe recently. This will make you more relatable, forging genuine connections with your people. This is all about just making sure that they feel comfortable to tell you if they're being stressed out. Because remember, you're not right there in the office with them, seeing them, so you need to communicate about this. Pause frequently to give the other person, space to talk or to ask questions. Through these coaching practices, you'll hold one-on-ones that build people's confidence and self-awareness. Here's another thing to consider: feedback sharing processes. 80% of people who have received meaningful feedback in the past week are highly engaged. So make sharing constructive feedback and asking for input in turn a priority. But how you deliver feedback matters, especially across cultures. Different cultures have different ways of approaching feedback. For some, being direct and forthright is expected. For others, that feels harsh and abrasive. Or people might hold back from sharing candid thoughts with leaders due to the respect for authority. In some cultures, people find ways to share feedback more indirectly or subtly, requiring others to read between the lines. Understanding these cultural differences will help you in these situations. Given all these factors, here's a few ways to offer and invite clear feedback. Here's one of the things is tailor your feedback to the other person's cultural preference. Whenever possible, Consider what will help them hear you and hear your message most clearly. Use a feedback sharing model to make sure that both you're getting your most crucial points across and also they're understanding what you're saying. One model you can look at is in the Situation Behavioral Impact Model, or SBI. For instance, you state the context, describe the behavior that occurs, and then say how it affects you or others. And basically just kind of laying it out and helping them to see how others may interpret their actions or how they communicate. Same thing for yourself. Create sharing norms for providing feedback in all directions. Invite feedback regularly, expressing gratitude for it, and then also encourage others to do the same. Also make sure that you share constructive feedback and praise routinely with everyone on your team. Give employees different options for sharing, whether it's feedback for your team or for the manager, and for providing feedback about the organization. Hold virtual town meetings, whenever you invite that input. For instance, you may also create alternative channels for sharing opinions and ideas, like maybe a virtual suggestion box, or it could reside inside of Trello or also maybe inside of a Slack channel. Through these cultural inclusive practices, you'll ensure everyone receives clear and supportive feedback, including you. Another point that we want to talk about is about trusting your team. On a remote team, managers might worry about how the people are using their time, but micromanaging people on a remote team or any team is a huge mistake. Instead, signal that you trust them by giving them autonomy in how they manage their time. Check in about milestones and evaluate deliverables rather than expectations of a play-by-play on how they're completing their tasks. So focus on the deliverables and what is supposed to be done, not on how they're spending every minute of their day. That doesn't mean you shouldn't talk about, time management. During one-on-ones, you can ask about challenges that they're facing on how they prioritize their day and work and handling that efficiently. Create a supportive space where they can bring up these sort of issues, then coach them in how to boost their productivity. Look, they want to be productive. They want to have some ownership in what they're working on for you, so help them through these processes. This will help you have less things to do, like micromanaging their day or understanding what they're doing minute by minute, and will help you accomplish the goals. That's the real thing you're trying to accomplish, is hit the different milestones, hit the different goals, not trying to make sure that they're being busy every moment of the day. Another thing you need to do is make sure that you hire people who align with your culture. Capable people with the right mindset help one another grow. So whenever hiring, pay close attention to people's personal ethics and then also their values. Look for those who align with your core cultural values. Importantly, this doesn't mean hiring people who aren't exact clones of you. What this does mean is that they could have an entirely different background while still sharing your commitment to integrity or the spirit of innovation. In interviews, your hiring team can ask for concrete examples of how they're demonstrating these qualities. They will give you a good sense of whether they fit well into your culture or not. Here's something you can consider also: foster cultural awareness. A virtual team member includes people of several different cultures. While cultural diversity is increasing rapidly, cultural understanding doesn't automatically just follow. Teams typically need some guidance in navigating cultural differences. Consider facilitating discussions with your team that helps them to understand the cultural norms on things like communication and decision making. And as a leader, take time to learn about these norms on your own as well. For instance, people with some cultures are perfectly comfortable with interrupting or talking over one another. To them, it doesn't feel rude. Meanwhile, those of other cultures may feel silenced or disregarded by this kind of treatment. Attitudes towards hierarchy and time can differ as well. In Scandinavian cultures, people prefer to avoid a strict hierarchy, using first names more commonly and more informally with communication. Meanwhile, in Chinese culture, people tend to prefer more formal language that conveys respect for authority and also those different people that are over them. I read the other day in an open journal on social science, Scandinavian cultures also prioritize short-term results, while Chinese cultures focus on long-term goals and relationships. To bridge cultural differences, you can also observe how people respond to one another's communication style during your meetings. You can always call for a pause or a round robin style check-in. That way, everyone's thoughts on a topic can be heard. Remember moments that matter. Celebrate meaningful moments will go a long way towards building a culture in a remote team. Recognizing key milestones in people's personal and professional lives. Like for instance, here's a few different examples for you. Completion of onboarding or a training program. Job anniversaries or other career milestones. Maybe it's birthdays or other personal milestones that they've also mentioned. Team achievements like completing a big project together is also a great thing to make sure that everybody's aware of and to celebrate together. Give someone a shout out during a meeting for successfully completing some sort of a workshop. Recognize these milestones will help create a positive culture when people notice one another's successes. Hey, everyone loves to see what you're praising. People will repeat what you praise and put emphasis on whatever you praise, because everybody loves a good pat on the back. They also just really want to know that they're doing a good job. So something else let's talk about is supporting onboarding development. By prioritizing each person's growth, you'll build a strong, supportive culture. In turn, that will prompt each person to give their best effort in everything that they do. Point people towards resources that will help benefit them at this stage or in their career. This will include workshops or books. Most importantly, strive to be a good mentor. Being a supportive coach who gives clear, confident feedback is the best way to guide everyone in fulfilling their potential. Building a team culture remotely requires effort, but it will pay big dividends in terms of productivity, relationships, and also job satisfaction. By taking these steps, you'll build a culture centered on trust, communication, and understanding. Though you may be in a different time zone, you and your employees will forge strong and lasting bonds that will work together seamlessly. It's not only going to just affect your remote staff, but also your staff that still does work, inside of the office. They will greatly benefit from this as well, because you're going to have to pay closer attention and make it work better for everybody. A great culture begins with exceptional staff. Want to discuss how hiring the right virtual assistant can help you build an outstanding culture? Hey, let's set up a call. By hiring remotely, you can tap into a vast pool of talent with the potential to help you take your organization to the next level.